Councilman at Large Gabe Albanese is resigning from the county council, and he's doing it effective December 1st, and he's taking his old job with the county back. Now, the date is significant. If the resignation had been effective a day earlier, a special election would have been held, but making it on December 1st means that the council gets to fill the vacancy under the council charter. Mike, you were on the council, so can you elaborate on the process, and do you have any predictions about how all of this will turn out?
So the process is actually pretty straightforward because what you do is it's actually like any other kind of appointment that the council makes. So they seek applicants. So those interested parties, they will choose some number of them to interview, and then they will ultimately make a selection. So it's like picking the planning board or picking planning board chair, planning board members. Very similar process in that respect. I think it will be interesting. Gabe is a very well-regarded council member, very well-regarded county official, and so I think that to replace him is not straightforward. He was very visible, and so I think that you're going to have to identify someone who kind of can step in at a similar stature to some degree, which actually isn't necessarily as hard as it might sound, because the other piece that you have is you can get somebody who may have done something previously, who may have the time to fill that position, because they're obviously looking for someone not to run to fill that. They want that to be an open seat in the upcoming election, so that someone can't come in there and kind of use that as the stepping stone and run from that seat. We've done that twice before, and people have generally honored that. It is a trust thing. It is an honor thing. And so presumably the person could run, but oftentimes they've managed to find a person who is in a position that didn't want to run further. So we'll see how that plays out.
So let me turn to the process again. We talked a little bit about it. So if it was December 1st, it gets filled by the council. If it was November 30th, it would have been a special election. It's interesting. So originally Gabe said, I'm not running again. And then it was later on that he chose to resign and go back to his old position. I wanted to kind of follow up. Does that mean there perhaps was somebody in mind? Because there seemed to be some, how shall I say, a number of steps that went into the process before he resigned.
My guess is probably not, and the reason I say that is because we've had some special elections in Prince George's County in this past year, and they are exceedingly expensive. And so, they've had a number of council seats that had to be vacancies that had to be filled, and just the time and the cost that goes into that, especially given, I think, the challenges that all budgets are seeing right now, to be able to do it as a council appointment for that year, I think saves a lot of headache, heartache, and resources that can be better allocated in other places.
What say you, Jackie? Special election?
Actually agree with Mike on this one. I ordinarily am a big fan of letting the people have their voice and their say on this, and I would be more of an advocate for that if this was more of a competitive race. But I think that all of us know that we could have spent the time and the money on a special election, and the race would have turned out for the Democrat anyway. So I think in this particular instance, it made sense just to have an appointment moving forward. What I don't agree with is this idea of let's restrict our people to somebody who's not going to run again. I don't think that it's on the council to make that call. I think they should pick the best person for the job. And if they truly are picking the best person for the job, that person should be encouraged to run again and to continue the good work they're doing for the county and the people of the county.
Well, let's turn to elections that are actually being held and with the voters participating, and that includes Gaithersburg. Gaithersburg is electing its mayor and council members in what is now an election season, not just election day. Mike, incumbent Mayor Judd Ashman has been in office now for a decade. Time flies, doesn't it? And he's been unopposed in some past elections, but not this year. How'd you handicap that race?
I think Judd has done a great job as the mayor of Gaithersburg, and I think he's very well regarded in the community. I think there is potentially some speculation that former Mayor Katz, who's council member now, is not going to necessarily run again, and so that Judd may in fact at some point run for that seat. And so I think one of the reasons you're seeing somebody running is potentially, if that were to occur, then you would have again, another election in Gaithersburg. And so someone to kind of get their name out there in the event that that opportunity presents itself later on this year for them to run again. And so I think that's as much at play as the fact that somebody's running against the incumbent mayor. I think the incumbent mayor has done a nice job. I think it's trying to get some sales work done in the anticipation that something may change down the road.
So that is actually where special elections get really expensive. We've seen that in Prince George's County, where one person runs and then their position opens up and it kind of comes down like a waterfall. Jackie, the incumbent council members are seeking re-election, but they're being challenged. What do those races look like?
I think that we could see some shakeup happening. I think, following the Biden years, we've seen a lot of emphasis on age. And I think that, especially as we talked about with housing, we're seeing an exodus of young people. I think that there is an appetite for younger candidates to come in. And both of the challengers coming in are younger than the two incumbents. Not to say that either of them are on death's door or anything like that. But, particularly Chris Toms, who's only 25, I think, and is a lifelong resident of Gaithersburg. I think people are interested to see a new generation of leadership and ideas come in, people who understand the impacts that AI is going to have on the job market, people who understand, the struggles that young people are having acquiring housing and being able to afford living here. So I think that you could see some surprises come out as people, flock towards younger candidates. And I think that's going to be a bellwether as well going into next year's legislative races.
Well, speaking of bellwethers, let's turn to the gubernatorial races. In the year after the presidential election, the Virginia and New Jersey governor's races tend to take sort of outsized importance as bellwethers, a kind of a referendum on the administration. Now, 4 years ago, Republicans won Virginia, and they came very close in New Jersey. So I'm going to turn to you, Jackie, because I know you're a Jersey girl at heart, even though you're now in Montgomery County. What are your predictions for your old home state?
I think we're going to see a reverse scenario of what we had in 2021. So I was watching Fox News that night in 2021, and there were all eyes on Virginia because they were anticipating big things there. And then all of a sudden, New Jersey was sneaking up, and they're like, oh, we don't actually have a lot of research on this. We weren't expecting this to be close. And I think you're going to see a similar thing at play here. I think Jack Ciattarelli has got it in New Jersey. I really do, especially in North Jersey, where people are kind of a little terrified by what's going on in New York City right now. But I think in Virginia, I think Jason Miyares is going to win that race. And I think you could see a possibility that he brings the other two over the edge with him. I think more so for John Reed than for Winsome Sears. But I think that it's going to get interesting, and it's going to be closer than people think.
Mike, Democrats do seem to have the upper hand in Virginia, at least until the AG's text messages came public, which obviously has been the focus of the race for quite some time since then. How do things look now?
I think it's been interesting. Obviously, there was, from the governor's race perspective, Congresswoman Spanberger was at a 12-point lead. I think that's come down some. But it's interesting, to Jackie's point, even though the AG race, I think, has tightened, there hasn't seemed to be a lot of spillover to either the other races, which is good. I think that should be contained. Obviously, if I'm running on the other side, you're trying to tar everybody with that same brush. I get that. Fortunately, it seems like voters are being able to differentiate between those points. I think that it is going to be really important, though, for the Democrats to continue to be strong on what it is that they've done and why they want to be running. One of the things that's been intriguing me, and obviously we're just watching the ads, is I've yet to hear anything that the Republican candidates actually say they want to be doing. They just keep attacking the Democratic candidates. And so at some point, I don't care what race it is. It'd be really nice to actually see somebody say why they want to run for the position, as opposed to just attacking the other person that's running against them.
Jackie, I'll let you. What do you think these races say about the public mood? I think Mike's right. We've kind of seen a focus on the negative side. Is that the way people are feeling right now, or?
Yeah, I think most voters are in that same boat. They're like, okay, I get it. You don't like the other guy, but what are you gonna do? What makes you so different? I think we need to for sure get back to that. And two things I want to call out from the Virginia's race. The first one is particularly with the Jay Jones incident. I think that this highlights why we can't have 6 weeks of early voting. You have a lot of people who would have changed their vote for AG. They did poll this had they known about the text messages before they early voted. So I think that this is definitely a call for early voting to be tightened up a little bit in Virginia. And the other one is, and I don't know if people saw this, John Reed challenged a lieutenant governor candidate for the Democrat side to a debate. She refused. So the other night, he debated an AI facsimile of his opponent on YouTube. And it's incredibly little kitschy, super funny, very entertaining. But I think that also calls out this bigger issue of I think that voters deserve to have an informed choice, and one of the best ways to get that is by having a debate between the candidates. I think that's important.
That's a really scary thought, Mike, don't you think? Perhaps an AI could be used to replace us on 21.
People may advocate for that. I hope that they don't advocate that in their political races. But yeah, no, it is very scary. I mean, honestly, what Jackie just talked about is, I recognize that was tongue in cheek, but we've also seen the president using AI to create various images that the Speaker of the House says are satire. I'm not sure I would buy any of that. But again, the Speaker of the House is trying to defend whatever the president does, as he seems to do very well, and anytime anybody asks. But no, the use of AI, I think, to be incorporated into political discourse, I think is going to be really, really challenging because you're just seeing more and more of it. And I think this week in Great Britain, they actually showed a newscaster did an entire news program, and the entire the newscaster was AI, and the entire background was AI. None of it was real, but you would have never known that had they not said that at the end.